The great chamber of the Galactic Concord assembly floated in the empty space between three dying stars. It was a massive structure, built thousands of years ago by species that no longer existed. The walls were made of a dark metal that absorbed light, and the ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. 42 species sent their representatives here. 42 voices were supposed to matter equally, but everyone who had ever sat in that chamber knew the truth. Some voices mattered more than others, and humanity's voice mattered the least of all. Nora Beckett stood at the speaking platform, her hands steady on the edges of the podium. She was a tall woman with sharp brown eyes and dark hair pulled back tight against her head. She wore the plain gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, and she stood straight, even though she could feel the weight of 1,000 alien eyes pressing down on her from every direction. She had been Earth's ambassador to the Concord for 6 years now. 6 years of smiling when she wanted to scream. 6 years of nodding politely while creatures 10 times her size told her that her species was not ready, not advanced enough, not worthy of a bigger seat at the table. Today she was presenting a simple request. Earth wanted access to 3 uninhabited star systems near its borders for mining operations. The systems were empty. No one lived there. No one had claimed them. It should have been a routine matter, approved in minutes and forgotten by lunch. She was halfway through her second sentence when the interruption came. "If I may," said a deep voice that rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. Nora stopped. She knew that voice. Everyone in the chamber knew that voice. It belonged to High Speaker Vorath of the Draelith hegemony. The Draelith were one of the 3 elder species that truly ran the Concord. They were enormous beings, nearly 4 meters tall, with thick gray skin and 4 arms that ended in hands capable of crushing stone. Vorath was the oldest and most powerful among them, and when he spoke, the chamber always listened. Vorath rose from his elevated seat and walked slowly to the center of the floor. He did not look at Nora. He looked at the assembly. Then he raised one of his 4 hands and activated a holographic display that filled the entire center of the chamber with light. The display showed Earth's military. Every ship, every station, every weapon system. 40 patrol corvettes, 2 orbital defense platforms, a handful of short-range fighters. It was all laid out in detail, rotating slowly so that every delegate could see. "This," Vorath said, "is what protects the species that now asks us for mining rights." It was hard to describe because it came from dozens of different kinds of throats and breathing organs, but the meaning was universal. It was laughter. Vorath let it build. Then he continued. "Humanity has been a member of this Concord for 14 years. In that time, they have expanded to 3 colony worlds. 3. The Pelori settled 3 worlds before their first century of spaceflight was complete. The Zarathi had conquered an entire arm of the galaxy by the time they were as old as these humans." More laughter, louder now. "They are fragile," Vorath said, and the holographic display shifted to show a diagram of human biology. "They breathe a narrow mix of gases. They die if the temperature shifts by a few degrees in either direction. Their bones break under forces that a Draelith child could survive without discomfort. They live, on average, less than 100 years. By the time one of them learns anything useful, they are already dying." Nora stood perfectly still. Her face showed nothing. Her hands did not tremble. But inside her chest, something cold and heavy was forming, like a stone made of ice and anger pressed together into something hard. The Zarathi delegate, a thin and pale creature with too many eyes, rose next. "The human delegation has repeatedly requested expanded territorial rights," it said in its high, whistling voice. "But rights come with responsibilities. What does Earth contribute to collective security? What does Earth offer the Concord that we cannot provide for ourselves 1,000 times over? The Pelori Trade Federation's representative, a being that looked like a collection of golden rings stacked on top of each other, spoke without standing. I move to reduce Earth's voting allocation by 50%, effective immediately. Insufficient contribution to the collective body. The vote was called. It passed in seconds. Not a single species objected. Some of them did not even bother to vote. They just watched, amused, as if the whole thing were entertainment. Nora gathered her documents. She stepped down from the speaking platform. She walked through the long corridor that led back to the human section of the station, and she did not look back. She did not cry. She did not slam her fist against the wall, though she wanted to. She went to her office, sat down at her desk, and opened the secure communication channel to Earth. She transmitted the full recording of the session. Every word, every laugh, every moment of it, unedited and raw. The recording reached Earth 7 minutes later. It passed through 3 layers of military encryption and landed on a screen inside a quiet office in Geneva, where a man named Cal Whitmore sat behind a desk that had once belonged to a Secretary General of the United Nations, back when Earth still had nations. Cal was not a large man. He was in his early 60s, with gray hair cut short, and a face that looked like it had been carved out of something patient and hard. He had been Secretary General of United Earth for 9 years. He had guided humanity through first contact, through the treaty negotiations, through the long and humiliating process of becoming the galaxy's youngest and weakest member species. He had smiled through all of it, because he believed that patience was a weapon, and that the time to use it had not yet come. He watched the recording once. Then he watched it again. He listened to the way it echoed through the chamber, the way it bounced off those ancient dark walls and came back sounding like something cruel and old. Then he closed the recording and sat in silence for a full minute. He picked up his communicator and connected to the United Earth Defense Council, which included the heads of every military branch, every intelligence agency, and every secret research division that humanity had built over the past 14 years. They just told the entire galaxy that we are nothing, Cal said. His voice was calm. It was always calm. That was what made people afraid of it. I think it is time we stopped pretending to agree with them. He paused. Then he gave the order that changed everything. Activate Longbow protocol. All sites, all divisions, no exceptions. The line went quiet. Then one by one, voices came back confirming receipt of the order. From Mars, from the asteroid belt, from the deep stations, hidden in places the galaxy did not even know humanity had reached. On the Concord station, Nora Beckett sat alone in her office and stared at the wall. She did not know about Longbow. She did not know what was coming. But she knew, in the way that people sometimes know things before they have the words for them, that something had just shifted. Something deep and heavy and irreversible, like a mountain beginning to slide. She poured herself a glass of water, drank it slowly, and whispered to the empty room. You should not have laughed. 14 years ago, when the first alien signal reached Earth, the whole planet held its breath. People cried in the streets. Religious leaders called it a sign from God. Scientists danced in their laboratories. For one brief and shining moment, every human being alive shared the same feeling. The feeling that the universe was bigger and more wonderful than they had ever imagined, and that they were no longer alone in it. That feeling lasted about 3 weeks. The Galactic Concord arrived with open arms and closed fists. They welcomed humanity warmly. They praised Earth's resilience and creativity. They said all the right things. And then they placed a stack of treaties on the table and told humanity to sign them if they wanted to be part of the galactic community. Cal Whitmore was not yet Secretary General at the time, but he was part of the team that reviewed those treaties. He read every line, and he saw, with perfect clarity, what the treaties really were. They were not agreements between equals. They were leashes. The Treaty on Advanced Weapons Development prohibited any member species from building weapons above a certain energy threshold without approval from the Concord Security Committee, a committee controlled entirely by the three elder species. The Treaty on Artificial Intelligence banned the creation of autonomous thinking machines above a certain level of complexity. The Treaty on Dimensional Engineering forbade research into certain areas of physics that the elder species had already mastered centuries ago. The Treaty on Self-Replicating Manufacturing made it illegal to build machines that could build copies of themselves, which was the fastest path to industrial expansion. Every treaty had the same effect. It kept younger species dependent on the elder ones. It kept them small, weak, and grateful. Earth signed every single one. And then, 6 months later, in a facility buried 300 meters beneath the southern ice cap of Mars, a woman named Lena Marsh broke every single one. Lena was a physicist. She had wild red hair that she never remembered to brush, and green eyes that always looked like they were staring at something no one else could see. She was 31 years old when the project began, and she had already published more papers on quantum field manipulation than anyone else on Earth. When the government approached her with a simple question, "Can you build what they told us we cannot build?" she smiled and said, "I already started." The facility was called the Prometheus Collective, and it did not exist on any official record. Its power came from a geothermal tap that went so deep into Mars that it touched the planet's molten core. Its staff were selected from the brightest minds on Earth and its 3 colony worlds, and every one of them understood that what they were doing was not just illegal by galactic law. It was the kind of illegal that could get their entire species erased from the map. They did it anyway. Over 13 years, the Prometheus Collective achieved things that the Concord believed were impossible for a species as young as humanity. They built contained singularity reactors, tiny black holes held in magnetic bottles, producing more energy than a star. They created war mine networks, artificial intelligences so advanced that they could coordinate 1,000 ships in battle as easily as a human could blink. They developed phase-slip drives that folded space in ways the Concord's own faster-than-light technology could not match. And they engineered adaptive nanoarmor, a material that could rewrite its own molecular structure in real time, becoming harder, softer, reflective, or invisible, depending on what was needed. But technology alone was not enough. You could build the sharpest sword in the galaxy, but it meant nothing if you had no army to swing it. That was where Admiral Danny Holt came in. Danny was a quiet man from a small town in Montana who had joined the Earth Defense Force because he liked the idea of flying. He turned out to be good at more than flying. He turned out to be good at planning, at logistics, at building things in places where no one was looking. When the government asked him to take command of Earth's official defense fleet, the 40 sad little corvettes that the galaxy loved to laugh at, he accepted. And then he asked for a second job. His second job was building a real fleet. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter was full of rocks. Some of those rocks were very large, and some of those very large rocks, over the course of 13 years, were quietly hollowed out and filled with shipyards, factories, and dry docks. The ore that was removed from the asteroids was used to build the ships. The ships were built by self-replicating machines that, according to galactic law, did not exist. By the time the Longbow Protocol was activated, Danny Holt's Shadow Fleet numbered over 400 warships. 12 of them were Dreadnought-class vessels, massive, heavily armed ships that were each larger than anything the Concord had ever built. They were painted black. They carried no markings, and they had been sitting in the dark, fully armed and fully crewed, for 6 years, waiting for a signal that Danny had sometimes wondered would never come. When the signal did come, Danny was in his office on Ceres, eating a sandwich. His communicator lit up with a single word: Longbow. He set down the sandwich, wiped his hands on his pants, and opened a channel to Lena Marsh on Mars. "It's happening," he said. There was a pause. Then Lena's voice came through, tired but steady. "Are we ready?" "We have been ready for 6 years. I was starting to worry we would never get the excuse." Across 3 star systems, things began to move. Crews reported to their ships. Reactors powered up inside hollowed-out asteroids. War mines came online and began running simulations. Supply lines that had been established in secret years ago activated and started moving fuel, ammunition, and replacement parts to staging areas. And on the Concord station, 72 hours after the vote that stripped Earth of half its voice, Nora Beckett stood once again at the speaking platform in the Great Chamber. This time, she was not asking for mining rights. She held a single document in her hand. It was written on actual paper, which was a human tradition that no other species understood or cared about. She looked out at the assembly, at the Dralith in their high seats, at the Zarathi with their many eyes, at the Pelori spinning slowly in their golden rings, and she began to read. "The United Earth Government, acting on behalf of all human citizens across all territories and colonies, hereby formally withdraws from every treaty, agreement, and accord signed with the Galactic Concord since the date of first contact. This withdrawal is immediate, total, and non-negotiable. Earth no longer recognizes the authority of this body over its territory, its citizens, or its future." She folded the paper. She placed it on the podium, and then she looked up, and for just a moment, something flickered behind her eyes. Something that looked very much like satisfaction. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted, hissed, and vibrated with alarm. The Dralith High Speaker Vorath rose from his seat and stared down at her with his ancient, heavy eyes. "You understand what this means," he said. It was not a question. "I understand perfectly," Nora replied. "Do you?" She turned and walked out of the chamber for the second time that week. But this time, she was not walking away in humiliation. She was walking away because she had nothing left to say. Behind her, the chamber buzzed with confusion, outrage, and something else that not everyone recognized right away. It was quiet, and it hid at the edges of all that noise, but it was there. It was fear. The elder species did not yet understand what Earth had done. They did not know about the Prometheus Collective. They did not know about the Shadow Fleet. They did not know that for 13 years, humanity had smiled and nodded and signed their papers and obeyed their rules. And all the while, in the dark places beneath the surface, they had been building something that would make the galaxy tremble. They thought Earth was throwing a tantrum, a small, weak species having a moment of foolish pride. They would learn. Very soon, they would learn. The Dralith did not waste time. They never did. Their empire had been built on the simple belief that strength was the only language the universe respected, and that anyone who showed weakness deserved whatever came next. When Earth withdrew from the treaties, the Dralith saw it as an opportunity, not a threat. A small species with no real military had just cut itself off from the only protection it had ever known. In the minds of the Dralith High Command, this was not a crisis. It was a gift. High Speaker Vorath ordered a fleet assembled within 48 hours. 200 warships, heavy cruisers, assault carriers, and destroyer escorts, pulled from 3 different Dralith battle groups and sent toward Earth's nearest colony world, a planet called New Avalon. The official reason was peacekeeping. The real reason was punishment. The Dralith wanted to park 200 ships in orbit around a human world and watch humanity beg to come back to the table. It was a move they had used on younger species before. It always worked. The sight of that much firepower hanging in your sky had a way of making even the proudest species remember how small they were. The fleet made the jump to faster than light speed and crossed 40 light-years in just under 6 hours. When they dropped back into normal space at the edge of the new Avalon system, the Dralith sensors swept the area and found exactly what they expected to find. Nothing. No defense platforms, no patrol ships, no orbital stations, just a quiet planet with blue oceans and green continents, spinning slowly in the light of a yellow star. The Dralith commander, a veteran officer named Tarkin, leaned back in his seat and made a sound that in Dralith culture meant something between amusement and contempt. They did not even bother to defend it, he said to his bridge crew. Standard intimidation formation. The fleet moved inward, spreading out into a wide crescent designed to be visible from the planet's surface. It was a formation meant to fill the sky with ships, to make the people below look up and understand that they were powerless. They were halfway to orbit when the asteroids began to move. At first, the Dralith sensors flagged it as a glitch. Several large rock formations in the outer system were showing unusual energy signatures. Then the signatures grew stronger. Then the rocks began to break apart, not crumbling, but splitting along clean, precise lines, like shells cracking open to reveal what was hidden inside. Ships. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. 240 warships emerged from the asteroid field in perfect formation. They were black-hulled and angular, with sharp lines and no wasted space. They did not look like the clumsy little corvettes the galaxy had seen in Earth's official fleet. They looked like something else entirely. They looked like weapons, every centimeter of them designed for one purpose and one purpose only. And at the center of the formation, dwarfing everything around it, was the EDS Carthage. The Carthage was 5 kilometers long. Its hull was covered in arrays and turrets that the Dralith targeting computers could not identify. It moved with a smoothness that should have been impossible for something that size, as if the laws of physics had decided to make an exception for it. It came forward slowly, deliberately, placing itself directly between the Dralith fleet and the planet below. Captain Vince Calloway sat in the command chair of the Carthage and watched the Dralith fleet on his tactical display. Vince was a calm man. He had a square jaw, steady hands, and the kind of eyes that did not blink when things got loud. He had been commanding the Carthage in secret for 4 years, running drills in the dark spaces between stars where no one could see. He had trained his crew until they could fight in their sleep. He had waited a very long time for this moment, and now that it was here, he felt something that surprised him. He did not feel excited. He felt sad, because he knew that what was about to happen would be quick, and it would be ugly, and a lot of living things were about to die because their leaders had made a stupid decision. He opened a communication channel. His voice went out on all frequencies, reaching every Dralith ship simultaneously. Dralith Fleet, this is Captain Vince Calloway of the Earth Defense Ship Carthage. You are in human space without invitation. You have 60 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender your fleet. This is not a negotiation. On the Dralith flagship, Commander Tarkin stared at his sensor readouts and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. His stomach was tight. His 4 hands were gripping the arms of his chair hard enough to dent the metal. The numbers on his screen did not make sense. The energy readings coming from the human ships were enormous, far beyond anything he had ever seen from a vessel of any species. The war-mind AIs that controlled the human fleet were already probing his ship's defenses, testing their shields, mapping their weak points. He could feel it like insects crawling across his skin. But he was Draelith, and the Draelith did not surrender. All ships, attack pattern Delta. Target the large vessel first. Destroy it. The Draelith fleet opened fire. 200 ships launched a coordinated barrage of plasma torpedoes and kinetic rounds at the Carthage, filling the space between them with light and flurry. The Carthage did not move. The barrage hit its shields and broke apart like water against a cliff. The nano-armor on its hull shifted and rippled, absorbing the energy, redistributing it, turning it into nothing. Not a single shot penetrated. Not a single system flickered. Then the human fleet fired back. Phase lance batteries on the Carthage and its escort ships activated simultaneously. Phase lances did not work like normal weapons. They did not fire bolts of energy that had to travel through space and hit a target. Instead, they reached through the fabric of space itself and delivered their energy directly to the other side, bypassing shields, bypassing armor, bypassing everything. One moment, a Draelith cruiser was intact. The next moment, a line of white-hot energy appeared inside its reactor core, and the ship blew apart from the inside. At the same time, the human ships released swarm drones, thousands of small, fast, intelligent machines guided by the Warmind network. The drones moved like a living cloud, pouring into the gaps in the Draelith formation, attaching themselves to hulls and detonating with surgical precision. They targeted engine systems, weapons arrays, and communication nodes, crippling ships without always destroying them. And then there were the gravity pulse warheads. These were the weapons that truly terrified the survivors. A gravity pulse warhead created a brief, intense spike in gravitational force at its point of detonation. The effect was simple and horrible. Hull plating that was designed to withstand plasma fire and kinetic impacts was crushed inward like paper being crumpled in a fist. Ships folded in on themselves. Some of them collapsed so completely that they became nothing more than dense balls of compressed metal, tumbling silently through space. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, 174 Draelith ships were destroyed. Debris fields stretched across millions of kilometers. The remaining 26 ships, most of them badly damaged, powered down their weapons and transmitted surrender signals. Commander Tarkin's flagship had been split nearly in half by a single focused shot from the Carthage's main cannon. The front section was gone. The rear section was spinning slowly, venting atmosphere. Tarkin himself was alive, pinned under a collapsed bulkhead, breathing hard, and staring at a ceiling he could no longer see through the smoke. Captain Vince Calloway looked at the tactical display. The green dots of his fleet were all intact. Not a single human ship had been destroyed. The war mines were already coordinating rescue operations for surviving Draelith crew members, pulling them from wreckage and transporting them to medical bays. Vince opened a channel, not to the Draelith, but to the galaxy. An open broadcast, transmitted on every frequency, relayed through every communication node in range. He knew that within hours, every species in the Concord would hear this message. He thought about what to say. He could have gloated. He could have made threats. He could have listed every insult, every laugh, every moment of humiliation that his species had endured for 14 years. Instead, he kept it simple. This is Captain Vince Calloway of the Earth Defense Ship Carthage. A Draelith peacekeeping fleet entered human space without permission and engaged our forces. The engagement has concluded. Earth protects its own. Adjust your calculations accordingly. He closed the channel and leaned back in his chair. Around him, his bridge crew was silent. No one cheered. No one celebrated. They had just killed thousands of living beings. And even though those beings had come to threaten their home, that was not something any of them would ever feel good about. But they had done what needed to be done, and the galaxy, for the first time in a very long time, was paying attention. The recording of the battle spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species with a communication relay received it. Every government, every military, every scientist, and every ordinary citizen who had ever looked up at the stars and wondered who else was out there, they all saw what had happened at New Avalon. 200 Dralith warships reduced to scrap metal in 11 minutes by a species that just days ago the entire galaxy had been laughing at. The reactions came fast, and they came in waves. The first wave was shock. Pure, paralyzed, breathless shock. The kind of shock that happens when something you believed was impossible turns out to be not only possible, but already done. The Concord had spent 14 years treating humanity like a child allowed to sit at the adult's table. Now that child had picked up the table and broken it over someone's head, and no one knew what to say. The second wave was fear. The Dralith hegemony pulled every ship it had back behind its borders within 24 hours. For the first time in recorded history, the Dralith closed their frontier. They activated defensive systems around their core worlds that had not been turned on in centuries. They stopped answering communications from the Concord. They stopped answering communications from everyone. The Zarathi Communion and the Pelori Trade Federation, the other two elder species that had helped run the Concord for thousands of years, reacted differently. They did not retreat. They reached out. Quietly, through back channels and encrypted messages, they began contacting Earth's diplomatic offices. Their tone had changed. Where there had once been condescension and amusement, there was now a careful, measured politeness that everyone understood was really just fear wearing a nice suit. But the third wave, the one that truly changed everything, did not come from the elder species. It came from the younger ones. There were dozens of species in the Concord that had been admitted under the same kinds of treaties that Earth had signed. Species that had been told they could not develop certain technologies. Species that had been kept in carefully managed boxes, allowed to grow only as much as the elder species permitted. They had accepted this because they believed they had no choice. The Concord was too powerful. The elder species were too old, too advanced, too deeply entrenched. There was no point in fighting a system that had existed for 3,000 years. And then Earth fought it, and won. Messages began arriving at Earth's diplomatic offices from species that had never spoken to humanity before. Some of them were cautious, some of them were desperate. All of them were asking the same question: is there room for us in whatever you are building? But before Cal Whitmore could answer that question, he had one more card to play, and it was the card that would break the Concord forever. Her name was Maggie Ashland, and she was the director of the Office of External Affairs, which was Earth's polite name for its intelligence service. Maggie was a small woman with short gray hair, and a face that always looked slightly annoyed, as if the universe was being inefficient and she was tired of waiting for it to catch up. She had spent the last 10 years building a network of information-gathering operations across the galaxy. Listening posts, hacked communication relays, agents embedded in alien governments, and data mining algorithms that quietly sifted through the Concord's own archives, pulling out files that were never meant to be seen. What she had found was damning. On the morning after the Battle of New Avalon, Maggie released everything, not to Earth's government, not to a select group of allies, to everyone. She dumped thousands of classified Concord documents onto the open galactic network, where any species with a receiver could access them. She did it without warning, without negotiation, and without asking anyone's permission, because Maggie Ashland believed that the truth was not something you asked permission to tell. The documents told a story that many had suspected, but no one had been able to prove. The Galactic Concord was not, and had never been, a community of equals. It was a machine designed to keep the elder species in power by preventing younger species from ever growing strong enough to challenge them. The treaties were the mechanism. Every restriction on weapons, AI, dimensional engineering, and manufacturing had been carefully designed to cap the development of younger species at a level that was useful but not threatening. The elder species wanted the younger ones to be productive enough to contribute to the galactic economy, but never powerful enough to have a real voice in how things were run. And for species that figured this out and tried to push back, the consequences were severe. The documents contained records of at least 9 civilizations that had been quietly destroyed over the past 2,000 years. Not invaded, not conquered, destroyed. Their worlds sterilized, their populations scattered or wiped out, their names erased from Concord records as if they had never existed. The elder species had a name for this process. Translated into human language, it meant pruning. The galaxy read these documents, and the galaxy was horrified. Cal Whitmore waited 3 days. He let the information sink in. He let species that had been loyal Concord members for centuries sit with the knowledge that the system they had trusted had been designed to use them, and that the friends they thought they had at the top had been willing to kill them if they ever stepped out of line. Then he addressed the galaxy. He broadcast from a simple room in Geneva, sitting behind his old desk, wearing the same plain suit he always wore. He did not stand at a grand podium. He did not surround himself with flags or military officers. He sat in a chair and talked, the way one person talks to another when they have something important to say and they want to be believed. "My name is Cal Whitmore," he began. "I am the Secretary General of United Earth. I am speaking to every species, every government, and every individual who is listening. I will be brief, because the documents speak for themselves, and I do not think they need my help." He paused. "You have seen what the Concord really is. You have seen the treaties for what they are. You have seen the names of the species that were erased because they dared to grow beyond the limits that were set for them. I will not pretend that Earth is innocent in this. We signed those treaties. We accepted the system. The difference is that we also prepared for the day when we would have to break free of it, and that day has come." He leaned forward slightly. "Earth is not your enemy. We never were. But we will no longer be your subordinate. And we are not interested in replacing one unfair system with another. So here is what I am offering, and I am offering it to everyone." He laid out the terms. A new alliance, open to any species that wanted to join. No hidden treaties, no secret restrictions, no pruning. Every member would have an equal voice, regardless of age, size, or military power. Development would be shared openly. Technology would flow freely. Disputes would be settled by negotiation, not by the threat of extinction. "We are calling it the Terran Accord," Cal said. "Not because Earth intends to lead it, but because Earth is the one standing up and saying that the old way is finished. If you want to build something better, the door is open. All you have to do is walk through it." He ended the broadcast. Then he sat back and waited. 17 species accepted within the first week. They were mostly younger civilizations, the ones who had felt the weight of the Concord's restrictions most heavily. But they were followed, within days, by older species as well. Civilizations that had been Concord members for centuries, but had never been comfortable with how things were run. By the end of the month, 31 species had joined the Terran Accord. The Galactic Concord, which had once held 42 members, was reduced to 8. The Draelith, the Pelori, the Zarathi, and 5 smaller species too afraid to leave. Nora Beckett was appointed as the first Secretary General of the Terran Accord. The appointment surprised her more than anyone. She had spent 6 years being humiliated in the Concord chamber, and now she was being asked to lead the body that had replaced it. When they told her, she sat quietly for a long time before accepting. Her acceptance speech was broadcast to every member world of the new Accord. She stood at a simple podium, looked into the lens, and spoke clearly. 14 years ago I walked into the Concord chamber and promised that humanity would be a good partner. I meant it then, I mean it now. The difference is that now we get to define what good actually looks like. She paused, and something moved across her face. Not anger, not triumph, but something quieter. Something that looked like the feeling you get when you have been carrying a heavy weight for a very long time, and someone finally helps you set it down. The old system told us that strength meant keeping others weak. We reject that. Strength means lifting others up and trusting them to stand beside you. That is what the Terran Accord will be. Not a hierarchy, not a machine, a partnership. Across the galaxy, 31 species listened. And for the first time in a very long time, the future felt like something worth building. 5 years passed, and the galaxy became something new. It did not happen all at once. It happened the way most good things happen, slowly, unevenly, with setbacks and arguments, and long nights spent trying to solve problems that no one had ever faced before. Building a coalition of 31 species, each with its own language, its own history, its own way of seeing the universe, was not easy. There were disagreements about territory, about trade, about whose calendar to use for official meetings, and about 100 other things that seemed small on their own, but added up to the enormous, messy, complicated work of trying to live together. But they kept at it, and slowly, piece by piece, the Terran Accord became something real. The first great achievement was the sharing of technology. Under the old Concord, knowledge had flowed in one direction, from the top down, and only in carefully measured amounts. The elder species had hoarded their discoveries the way some creatures hoard food, not because they needed all of it, but because giving it away meant giving away power. The Terran Accord reversed this completely. Every member species opened its research archives. Every breakthrough was shared freely, and the results were astonishing. Human engineers, who were brilliant at building practical machines, but had always lacked the theoretical physics to push beyond their limits, suddenly had access to Zarathi mathematics, a system of understanding the universe so elegant and complete that human scientists who studied it described the experience as learning to see color for the first time. Zarathi physicists, who understood the equations but struggled with the messy business of turning ideas into working machines, suddenly had access to human engineering, the stubborn, creative, duct tape and determination approach to problem solving that had carried humanity from campfires to starships in a few thousand years. The Palori, who had joined the Accord in its second month, after their own internal revolution overthrew the leaders who had kept them tied to the old Concord, brought something neither humans nor Zarathi had: an economic system so sophisticated that it could model and manage the resources of an entire galactic arm without waste, corruption, or shortage. Within 2 years, the Accord's member worlds had eliminated poverty, not reduced it, eliminated it. And then there was the wormhole. Lena Marsh had not slowed down after the Longbow protocol was activated. If anything, she had sped up. The Prometheus Collective was no longer a secret. It was now the central research hub of the Terran Accord, and its staff had grown from a few hundred humans working in a hidden bunker on Mars to over 10,000 scientists from a dozen different species, working in a facility that now covered half the Martian South Pole. The problem of stable wormhole construction had haunted physics for centuries. The old Concord had claimed it was impossible. Their official scientific position was that while wormholes could exist in theory, the energy required to create and stabilize one was beyond the reach of any civilization, no matter how advanced. Maggie Ashland's intelligence dumps had included classified Concord research files showing that the elder species had made significant progress on wormhole technology centuries ago, and then buried the research, because a galaxy connected by wormholes was a galaxy where younger species could expand freely, and that was the last thing the elder species wanted. Lena took those buried files, combined them with human engineering and Sarathi mathematics, and built the first stable wormhole gate in a little over 3 years. It was not a small achievement. It was, by the consensus of every scientist who worked on it, the single greatest technological accomplishment in the history of every species involved. The gate connected Earth's solar system to a point on the far side of the galaxy, a region of space that no known species had ever visited. Beyond it lay thousands of unexplored star systems, millions of worlds, and possibilities that no one could fully imagine. When the gate was activated for the first time, Lena stood in the control room and watched the readings stabilize, and she cried. Not because she was sad, and not because she was proud, but because she understood what she had just done. She had opened a door that could never be closed, and on the other side of that door was everything. The EDS Carthage was the first ship through the gate. Captain Vince Calloway had been offered promotions, desk jobs, advisory positions, and a retirement package generous enough to buy a small moon. He had turned down all of them. He wanted to fly. And so the Carthage, the ship that had broken the Dralith fleet at New Avalon, became an exploration vessel. Its weapons still active, because Vince was not foolish, but its primary mission now focused on surveying new systems, cataloging new worlds, and making first contact with any civilizations that might be living beyond the gate. Vince sent a report back to Earth each week. His reports were short and direct, the way he was. He described the systems they surveyed, the worlds they found, the strange and beautiful things they encountered in the vast emptiness of unexplored space. His crew, which now included officers from 7 different species, had become a family, in the way that crews always do when they are far from home and dependent on each other. His most recent report ended with a line that somehow found its way onto the galactic network and spread to every corner of the Accord within hours. He had just been writing what he felt. New systems surveyed, 14. Hostile contacts, 0. Outlook, optimistic. Humanity did not come out here to fight. We came out here because the horizon kept going, and we wanted to see what was on the other side. Back on New Avalon, Admiral Danny Holt was retired. He had put in his years, built his fleet, fought his battle, and decided that he had earned the right to sit down. He lived in a small house near a river that ran through a valley on the planet's northern continent. The valley was green and quiet, and the river was full of fish that were not quite like Earth fish, but close enough that a man from Montana could enjoy catching them. He kept a piece of Dralith hull plating on the mantel above his fireplace. People who visited sometimes asked if it was a trophy. He always said no, a reminder that good people should not wait too long to stand up for themselves, because the longer you wait, the harder it gets, and the more it costs when you finally do. He fished most mornings. He read in the afternoons, and sometimes, in the evenings, he would sit on his porch and look up at the sky, which was full of ships, human ships, Zerathi ships, Pelori ships, and ships from species whose names he could not pronounce, all moving together, all going somewhere, all part of something that was bigger than any one of them. The Dralith hegemony, reduced and isolated behind its closed borders, held out for 4 years before reality caught up with pride. Their economy, which had depended on the Concord's trade networks, was collapsing. Their population, which had been told for centuries that they were the galaxy's rightful leaders, was asking questions that the old government could not answer. A new generation of Dralith, born after the Battle of New Avalon, had grown up knowing that their parents' way of doing things had failed. They did not want to keep hiding. The envoy arrived at the Terran Accord's headquarters on a Tuesday. It was a single Dralith, young by their standards, who walked into the reception hall and formally requested membership on behalf of the Dralith people. The request was received by Nora Beckett herself, who was now in her 4th year as Secretary General. She could have made the moment difficult. She could have reminded the envoy of what Vorath had said in the Concord chamber all those years ago. She could have listed the names of the species that Drelith had helped destroy. She could have demanded apologies, reparations, or public humiliation. There were people, human and otherwise, who wanted her to do exactly that. She did none of it. She welcomed the envoy. She poured water, because she had always believed that kindness cost nothing and meant everything. And she told the young Drelith that the Accord was built on the idea that the past did not have to dictate the future, and that any species willing to build something better was welcome to help. The envoy looked at her with those large, dark Drelith eyes and said, "Why are you not angry?" Nora thought about it. Then she said, "I was, for a long time. But anger is a fuel, not a destination. It got us here. It does not have to stay." The Drelith were admitted to the Terran Accord the following week. It was not without controversy, but it was done, because that was the kind of galaxy the Accord was trying to build. One where the door was always open, even for the people who once tried to slam it shut. In Geneva, Cal Whitmore sat in his office for one of the last times. He had served longer than he had ever intended, and he was tired in the way that old men get tired when they have given everything they had to give, and are ready to rest. His desk was clean, except for a single printed report, Vince Calloway's latest weekly update from beyond the gate. He read it slowly. He lingered on the last line. Then he set it down and looked out the window. The sky above Geneva was busy. Ships came and went at all hours now, carrying people and goods and ideas between worlds that had once been strangers. The contrails they left behind crossed and tangled in the upper atmosphere, drawing patterns that looked, if you squinted, like a net woven from 100 different threads, holding together not because any single thread was strong enough on its own, but because they were all connected. Cal leaned back in his chair and smiled. It was a small smile, tired around the edges, but real. "Not bad," he said to no one in particular, watching the ships climb toward the stars, for a bunch of scavengers on a wet rock. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in a very long time, he rested.